there was a British chemist and novelist named C.P. Snow, who wrote in the middle of the 20th century, sort of at the height when physics was kind of the new technology everybody was freaked out about, so the bomb and nuclear energy and all these things. And he sort of wrote this famous essay where he talked about the two cultures. And at the time, what he was talking about was two cultures of sort of science versus the literary culture. And basically, he described this kind of cultural divide that was forming, where basically, and it basically mirrors exactly what's happening today, where basically the sort of engineering culture, science culture, technical culture, math culture, kind of feels like it's running away with the future, and sort of feels very confident, and sort of feels like it's discovered the secret formula to progress. And then sort of the literary culture, liberal arts culture, non-technical culture. Of sort of normal people who aren't engineers, increasingly feels like, this technical stuff is getting like really weird and scary. And I mean, the atomic bomb, Bitcoin, interesting analogy. But, sort of these sort of fundamental, technology breakthroughs that like look like they're going to change the world in unpredictable ways. And for non-technical people, that can be weird and scary because who knows what the consequences are going to be, and who knows, how to think about these things. Money is interesting in that context because money is something that I would argue has been on the non-technical side of the culture for the last 1,000 years, for the last 300 years for sure, with paper money, and then before that, which is when sort of normal people think about money, they think about money in terms of who can you trust? Who can you trust, right? So which institution can you trust? Can you trust the U.S. government and government officials? Can you trust the U.S. Treasury Department? Can you trust the U.S. Mint? To catch, counterfeiters. It's very much, can you trust the banks? Can you put your money in the bank, or are you going to be able to get the money back out? Do you trust the bank? Do you trust the government standing behind the bank? And so sort of our sort of broad cultural view of money is it's based on trust in people and institutions. On the engineering side of things, people and institutions are beside the point. The core of it is, can you trust the math, right? Can you trust the math? Can you trust the algorithms? Can you trust the code? And can you trust cryptography? And so part of what's happening right now is engineers look at this and they're like, oh, it's obvious that Bitcoin is better because it's math that you can trust as opposed to people who you just never know, as we discovered in 2008. Normal people look at that and they're like, how can you trust math? Like, does that mean you have to be a mathematician, right? You have to have a PhD in mathematics in order to understand, or computer science to understand this stuff. And so I think what has to happen is actually the cultures have to come together. And for that to happen, basically, two things are required, which is, one is the engineering culture, which we represent and which a lot of us, here today represent. We have to really work hard to be able to explain this stuff, and articulate it and simplify it and make it easy to use and make it understandable. And we have to reach across, and we have to bring people with us, as opposed to just having this be something that's going to freak everybody out. But people on the other side of the culture, people in the literary, liberal arts, sort of non-technical culture, need to be open-minded and need to be willing to engage and understand and learn. And that's a big part of what I think has to happen over the next 3 years.
Does that have anything to do with why you made the big return to Twitter, being
Yes.
able to talk a lot about Bitcoin and kind of steer the conversation?
Yeah, and I think I mean the collective we, I think like we, all of us, everybody in Silicon Valley, everybody in the Bitcoin world, everybody in the technology industry, I think we have an obligation to explain ourselves. I think the days, and again, this goes right back to C.P. Snow, the days where you could have something, as fundamentally important as Bitcoin that just gets created, unleashed on the world, and everybody's expected to adapt to without having it get translated from weird and scary to like, okay, you can like actually wrap your head as a normal person around this. Like, that's our responsibility. Like, that's not going to happen by itself. By the way, that had to happen with the internet. It did happen with the internet. It had to happen with PCs. It did happen with PCs. So this does happen. We're just right in the middle of it, right? Or we're actually right at the beginning of it right now. And so we still have quite a ways to go.